Hello my dear fellow developers. Today I want to show you how to make a user authentication without running a server for it. AWS Cognito is a service that is very useful in case if you want to create registration and login for your users. You just create a user pool and then use a normal token-based authorization for it. And with serverless framework, it's even easier because you only configure everything once and then it does all the routine for you. So let's try to do it together. The first thing we need to do is to create our user pool itself, just the same way as other resources. Here under resources, we are creating user pool. Under user pool is going to be type AWS Cognito user pool. Now properties of our user pool. We need a name here. The name we will assign just the same way as here. It's going to be our service name and our stage. And in the middle, let's add pool. And now we need to define a schema. It's an array. And here we need to define what we want to see in our user data, which information we will collect and save about our users in the pool. Let's say we want to have an email. The name of the property is email, and then it's going to be required because we can't save a user without an email, and we're gonna allow users to change their emails. Then we have to define policies. And here we can, let's say, tell something about our password requirements. We want to set password policy. And we can say that we want minimum length. Let's say 6 or 8 or whatever. And we can also auto-verify our attributes. So we can say auto verified and it's going to be our email. Now when we created a user pool, we also need a user client that will interact with this pool. We can just copy this. And here we will rename it to user client. Type it's gonna be user pool client. Properties, client name. And here instead of the pool we will add client. We also need to set a generate secret property to false. And we also want to set our user pool ID. And it's going to be a reference to user pool. It means that this user client belongs to this user pool. It connects to this user pool. There is also a few settings for our access token validity. Let's say 5. ID token validity. Let's set this 5 as well. And explicit auth flows. Gonna be, I'll just copy it. It's gonna be this one. Here you can see all the explanation about these properties. For example, access token validity. If you set up 5, it's going to be 5 hours. And let's see what else we set up. The same for ID token. And these flows. This is just authentication flows that you want to support. And you can see all the possible values. So this one is like the most common one, where you just send email and password to the pool and to the AWS. It checks if it's valid or not. If you want, you can check out these docs and see what you need. Maybe you want to configure it differently. So that's our resources. Now we need to change our role to allow it to use our Cognito resources that we created and actions. So here under the statements, we are just adding another effect. And action. Action is gonna be the following. These actions I just gonna copy from another project. It's gonna be these ones. It's create user, set user password, and initiate authorization. This should be enough. We also need to set which resource is it. And let's do it like all of them for now. I think we are done. Now let's try to run our deploy. So our deploy is done. Let's go to AWS console and check what's going on there. So we need our Cognito service. It says I don't have user pools. Of course, I'm in the wrong region. In this region I don't have, but here I have 2 user pools. This is our new one, and we can see that it's created. That's our policy. You see we have policy for password, 6 symbols that we set up in serverless, and we can do some setup here as well if you want. So you can see which else things we can set up here and then do it in serverless. So on every deploy it would be the same. And what else we have? Let's go to the home page. Maybe let's try a new interface, because now I can't see how to find our client. Users, groups, app integrations. Oh yeah, here it is. That's our client that we also created via serverless. You can see creation time, January 14th, it's today. And yeah, so serverless created everything for us, and we can continue to work on our authentication. Let's now create our API for it. So now we have to add our pool and client. Here to the environment, let's add new variables. It's gonna be this one, and user pool client. It's gonna be this one. Now let's run our backend. Okay, now let's create our registration. As usual, we will create a function. Let's call it register.js, and here we can copy paste the top part and this one, and this one. And what our register function gonna do? First, get a user password and email. That's the minimum data that we need to register a user. So we need to get it from the event body, just like here we're getting data, email, password. Here in our providers, we will add a new one. We will add Cognito. So it's Cognito Identity Service Provider. And let's export it. And also we need to get our user pool name or ID, whatever it was. This user pool from our environment variables. So let's add it here. And let's import it here. I just want to check here in the console log if you're getting it. And let's console log our email and password. And let's add our new function to serverless file. Here it's gonna be register, and just let's check here that it is renamed, and let's delete things that we don't need. And in our serverless we need to add a path. Let it be just register. So let's test it in Postman. We need our email, and we need our name. Oh, not name, sorry, password. Should be at least 6 super safe passwords. So let's change it to post and try. Okay, we need to restart backend because we added a new function. Trying again. What's missing? User pool def. Oh, we need to send response. Yeah. Okay, so we get our user pool name and our email and password. Now we're gonna use our Cognito provider, and we're gonna call this Cognito admin create user, and we're gonna pass some parameters to this call, and again it returns our promise. So what we have to pass here to our admin create user method, we have to pass user pool ID, and it's gonna be our user pool, then our username. We're gonna use email for it, and we also gonna use our email for user attributes. And here we're gonna pass an array, not an object. So it's gonna be array of attributes. And here we can add our email. And value email. And normally when we create a user, we would send an email to this email address. But as we are now just developing our application and we don't want to send any extra emails, we will just set that our email is verified here. And we will set it to true. And we will also add another parameter here. After this, it's going to be message action. And we will set it to suppress, because we don't want to send this email. With double P. And this should create our user. And we also want to set a password for this user. We need to call Cognito again, but with another method. It's gonna be Cognito admin set user password. And here we of course gonna set our password, the one which we are getting from our request, and again user pool ID. And username for who we are setting up the password. It's going to be our email. And permanent, let's set it to true because we don't want to force user to change it. And again return promise. And this part we actually want to call only if the result here has user properties. So let's add the condition. And if everything is fine here, we're gonna return here. Let's return, I don't know, result maybe. Just something to return. And let's test it again with Postman. So user pool ID. I think there is something wrong with user pool ID. Let's go to our pool that we created and let's find an ID. This is client, but we want the pool. User pool ID is this one. So this is not the name of the pool, it's different thing. And let's see how could we get it. I think probably in our server, in our serverless file, we should pass here not this thing, but let's try to do the reference. Not sure, let's try. Object. And if we just hard code it, So if we hard code it, it works. It returns us our user. So if we add this reference, we should get our pool ID instead of pool name. But the problem is that it's not gonna work locally by some reason. I think that's maybe bug in serverless offline. But if we deploy it and then we try with our remote URL to send the same request, let's just change an email, and then we are getting successful result. And if we go to our AWS and we go to the pool, we can see that we created the user and it worked perfectly. So for the local development, I suggest that we are here going just hard code our user pool ID just for local, because there is obviously some issues with passing environment variable. So let's try to do it. Let's run our server. Let's get back to localhost, change an email again, and yeah, so with a hard-coded value so before deploy we will just change it back to normal reference. Unfortunately, I didn't find a way to solve it properly. So that's it, we successfully saved our user. So when our registration is working, let's create a login function. Again, creating new file. Let's copy over our stuff from here. It will be pretty much the same as register, just instead of the function that we use here, admin create user, we will use another one that is admin initiate auth, and the parameters will be a little bit different. So let's do that. Let's write it. And also we need not only user pool environment variable, we also need user pool client ID. So let's add it in our serverless. We have it, but this is the wrong one, I think. So let's add this reference to the user client, was it? Or I don't remember. 1 second, I'll find it. Yes, it was user client. And for local development, we will again hard code it. Just let's find the user pool, app integration, client. This is a client and this is client ID. So we hard code it here and we will add it here. User client user pool client, yeah, and we will use it here. Okay, so now let's call our Cognito admin initiate auth, and the parameters will be auth flow. You remember we set it when we created our resources, so it's gonna be admin no spr auth, and it's gonna be user pool ID user pool client. Oh no, sorry, user pool. Why it's not happy? Ah, because this, and then client ID gonna be user pool client, and auth parameters, that's our email and password. So username, it's our email, and password is our password. And this is very straightforward part. And again, promise, and we will send our response to 100, and gonna be response. And we don't need this, we can just delete it, and we don't need this as well. Now we save it, we restart our, and we have to add our new function to serverless file. Under the register, we will add the login and rename it everywhere, and in the function itself. And now we restart our backend, and let's test. Here we change it from register to login, the path, and we can send the same email and password as we already created the user. I made a typo as RP. Something is wrong again. Oh yes, I need to return. My god, such a stupid mistake. Okay, now that should be fine. And we successfully logged in, and we got our access token. So let's just change our body here. We can just pass a response, authentication result, because we don't care about other stuff, to just make it a bit cleaner. And now again, now we're just getting just a bit cleaner response, and we got our access token. And now let's try to deploy our application just to make sure that everything works as expected. Let's just uncomment this stuff, and let's run yarn deploy. And we're gonna copy our remote URL for testing, and we will try our login test, our login endpoint. Okay, we deployed our stuff. Let's check, and we're getting our access token as well from our remote server, from our remote URL. So everything works fine. That's it for today, for this video. I hope it was useful for you, and in the next video I will show you how to connect it to our front end. So stay with me, watch the next videos. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe buttons.